Salvete, sodales. Hello, I'm here today, Andreas, speaking English, unfortunately, today to talk about some differences in Latin pronunciations. If you've been following my videos and seeing comments on my channel, you'll see a lot of people saying I'm pronouncing Latin incorrectly, or isn't it this instead of this? And I'm here to talk a little bit today about why it is not what is often thought to be, but rather why I pronounce Latin the way I do. And largely we're going to draw a dichotomy here, which perhaps is not as strong as just two options between ecclesiastical pronunciation of Latin and classical pronunciation of Latin. Ecclesiastical comes actually from the word ecclesia, which in Greek means an assembly of people. In Latin, and in specifically Christian Latin, comes to mean a church. So this is Latin that was used largely in religious contexts, as well as the classical Latin, which was used in not specifically religious contexts, right? Latin became the language of the Catholic Church, and that is actually owes partly to its preservation. So we're going to look at ecclesiastical versus classical pronunciation. I'm going to say a nota bene here about ecclesiastical pronunciation is that it does differ depending on the language. That is, ecclesiastical pronunciation is usually used today to refer to the Italian pronunciation of Latin, and that's the thing I'm going to model here, as most of the people that have been commenting on my videos are indeed Italian. But it could also differ depending on the person's native language. When Latin was spoken in the medieval period and in the Renaissance, often it was spoken according to the phonological rules, the sound rules that existed for the people speaking it, the vernacular language speaking it, the common language. So Germans, when they spoke Latin, spoke it with a German accent. Italians, when they spoke Latin, spoke it with an Italian accent. Spaniards, when they spoke Latin, also in a Spanish accent, so on and so forth. So that, for this sake of example here, we're going to talk a little bit about what is often seen on TV, right, which is usually representative of Italian pronunciation of Latin, and we're going to talk about classical Latin. So here are some examples to hopefully highlight those sound rules. If you want to learn more about Latin or see more content in Latin, follow us, subscribe, head to our YouTube channel, check out our podcasts. All of them are in our link tree, which is in our bio. So let's hit to it. Ecclesiastical pronunciation, let's look at this one. This is the name Cicero in English, referring to one of the greatest Latin writers and orators who ever lived. In its ecclesiastical pronunciation, it'll be Cicero, Cicero, with a ch sound. The ch sound doesn't exist in classical Latin. Here, it's pronounced Cicero, Cicero, with a hard C sound, Cicero. Example 1. Example 2. This here is the word for sky, or in Christian Latin often, heaven. So here I wrote two different ways of writing it because it was common in ecclesiastical writing to see this with an AE diphthong. Diphthong just means two vowel sounds together as one. And this one an OE diphthong. And they're both pronounced the same way in ecclesiastical. Here it's caelum, caelum. So caelum, again, that soft C sound, and then this becomes an E sound. And here in Latin it's caelum, caelum, caelum. And if you were to write Coelum, it'd be coelum, coelum, an oi sound. Okay, gemme, gemme, right? Gemme, soft G, right? And then AE becoming E, and definitely bouncing on that M. Gemme. And here in classical Latin, gemmai, gemmai, also jumping on that M sound, but G and I, gemmai, right? Mensis Martius. Mensis Martius, the month of March, right? Oh, sorry, by the way, gems. If you didn't know already, gems are jewels. Mensis Martius, the month of March. But in ecclesiastical, it's Mensis Martius, Martius. This TI sound makes a Z sound, like in translatio, which means a metaphor, not a translation, but a metaphor. It's translatio, right? And here, mensis Martius, mensis Martius in classical Latin. Back to ecclesiastical, philosophus, philosophus. In the 1st century BCE in classical Latin, this would be philosophus. So these PHs are actually what are called aspirated P consonants. They're P with a puff of air. So you put your hand in front of your mouth, you say P, And if you feel a puff of air, that's aspirated. In English, the best example for this is the P in pot versus the P in top. The P in top is unaspirated, top. The P in pot is aspirated, pot. Okay? Moving on. We're going quick here. Theatrum, theatrum, right? A theater, theatrum. That's what it is in ecclesiastical pronunciation. Theatrum, theatrum in classical pronunciation. Again, this TH is just like this PH. It creates a puff of air. And you can use the same example, pot and top, to explain that. In English, top has an aspirated T sound. Pot has a much less aspirated T sound. So, a theater, theatrum, theatrum. This one here, Magna Graecia. Magna Graecia. And I might not be doing this perfectly. I don't speak Italian perfectly. I am still in the process of learning Italian, right? But Magna Graecia, right? Magna, like lasagna, creates a y sound. But in Latin, this was magna, nasalized, up in the nose, Magna Graecia. Magna Graecia, right? Referring to the colony, the settlement, Magna Graecia. In English, we say Magna Graecia. Okay, Omo. Notice the lack of pronunciation of the letter H. Omo. Here in Latin, this is interesting, right? Because among the elite classes, they might have said homo. Among common classes, they might have said omo. We have evidence that first letter H, word initial H, was not pronounced in Latin, but thanks to a poem of Catullus and also some other inscriptionary work, we know that the H was sometimes pronounced, particularly by elite Romans, to demonstrate their knowledge of the Greek language, which did make a H sound, right? That's currently what's thought. Okay, finally, rosa. Rosa. This is the Italian. Notice that S is a Z sound. In some Italian dialects, as far as I understand it, it'll still be rosa, but rosa, the S makes more of a Z sound. In Latin, the Z sound does not exist like that. So you say rosa, rosa. And finally, salve versus salve. Salve, salve. These are major differences between the ecclesiastical pronunciation and the classical pronunciation. I might not have caught every single example. That happens. But I just wanted to point out to you the difference. This is often how modern or Neo-Latin is spoken, especially by people who live in Italy. I teach in Italy. I've taught in Italy with a company called Greco Latino Vivo. They're here on TikTok. Check out their stuff. It's fantastic. But classical pronunciation means always saying Cicero, Caelum, Gemmai, Mensis Martius, Philosophus, Theatrum, Magna Graecia, Homo, Rosa, et Salve. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this elucidates some of the differences between these two wonderful pronunciations. Pick the one you like better, but don't judge anyone for the one they have, okay? Valete multum, sodales.